The first two cities with the highest cost of living in Europe are also the most expensive in the world, even more so than New York and San Francisco. In Europe, the gap between the rich and the poor is growing increasingly wider, also driven by inflation. This has caused the cost of living to rise in many European countries, particularly in some cities. In this video, we will see which are the 10 most expensive cities in the European Union. And at the end of the video, we will also see which are the 10 cities across the European continent with the highest cost of living. Welcome to this new video from Amazing Europe. Number 10, Brussels, Belgium. In Brussels, the cost of rent has increased significantly in recent years. Here, you can see the monthly rent costs for 3 types of properties in Brussels. And here, you can see how much rents have increased compared to 2019, just 5 years ago. In the capital of Belgium, almost 1 in 4 residents is at risk of poverty or social exclusion. Moreover, Belgium's Statistical Institute has noted that 11% of Brussels residents face severe housing deprivation. We're talking about leaky roofs, excessive humidity, lack of toilets or showers, and more. It is often said that this is because there aren't enough houses for everyone in Brussels, but the president of the tenants union claims this is false. There are enough houses, but a significant portion is not being rented out. The reason seems to be that a third of the vacant houses are because investors purchase properties not to live in or rent out but with the intention of reselling them in the future at a higher price. Another third is due to bureaucratic issues that make it harder to transfer property from one person to another. The other third is because the houses are in poor condition and people don't want to renovate them immediately. Rent greatly exacerbates the cost of living in Brussels, which is already high on its own. According to Numbeo data, provided by the inhabitants of the Belgian capital themselves, a single person would spend an average of just over €1,000 per month, excluding housing costs. Number 9, Hamburg, Germany. In Germany, the cost of living is generally higher in the south than in the north. However, Hamburg is an exception, as it is located in the northern part of the country, even further north than Berlin. Hamburg is a city that attracts many students, young professionals, and multinational companies. Additionally, it is also the German city with the highest number of millionaires. All of this enriches the city's economy but also significantly increases the cost of living. To compare with the rest of Europe, Hamburg is even 78% more expensive than other cities in Western Europe. Here, too, both renting and buying a home are very expensive, though slightly less so than in Brussels. For example, a studio apartment in the city centre can be found for €1,000 per month, and double that if you're looking for a 3-room apartment. When it comes to purchasing a property, the story changes. According to data provided by Numbeo, in turn provided by the residents of the two cities themselves, the cost per square metre to buy an apartment in central Hamburg is on average twice that of Brussels. Number 8, Milan, Italy. Milan is not a place for young people, and it's not us saying that, but the numbers. For singles between the ages of 18 and 29, the cost of living is 37% higher than the average of Italian cities with more than 50,000 inhabitants. After all, studio apartments with a rent of €900 are not accessible to everyone. And this is the minimum price because if we look at the average, we're talking about more than €1,300 per month for a studio apartment in the city centre. So we're talking about rents that are even more expensive than in Brussels. Yet salaries are low. To be clear, not as low as, for example, in southern Italy, but lower than the rest of Lombardy, the region of which Milan is the capital. This is at least considering the salary of young low-income workers in the private sector. If their hourly wage is €7.73 gross in Lombardy, it drops to €7.46 per hour in Milan. In other types of jobs, salaries are generally higher than the regional average, but they are often not enough to compensate for the cost of living. In fact, excluding housing, the average expenses for a single person are around €1,000 per month, while a Milanese family spends on average more than €3,500. According to experts, the cost of living in Milan is increasing, but salaries have been stagnant for years. Number 7, Munich, Germany. Earlier, we mentioned that southern Germany is generally more expensive, and indeed in this ranking, we also find the wonderful city of Munich. Munich is famous throughout Germany for its high cost of living, and what certainly contributes the most to this is the cost of housing. We're talking about an average of €1,500 per month for a studio apartment. And if you want to buy a house, be prepared to spend even 50% more than you would in Hamburg. To be clear, salaries are high, but this is precisely why housing costs so much. Job opportunities attract many people to move to this Bavarian city, but the city is unable to build enough residential areas to meet the demand for housing. Since the demand is high but the supply is low, this naturally drives up the price of housing. Another important reason is that Bavaria is chosen by investors not only from Germany but from all over the world as a prime destination for real estate investment. People buy houses for long-term investments, so property owners in Munich have every interest in keeping prices high, and it will likely remain that way in the future. But even excluding housing, the cost of living is high. On average, a single person spends just under 1,100 euros per month, while a family spends close to 3,700 euros per month. Number 6. Cork, Ireland. Just like Milan, Cork is also not an easy city for young people, especially students. A survey reveals that the cost of living for students in Cork amounts to an average of 1,441 euros per month. If you add tuition fees to this, it exceeds 31,000 euros per year. But it's not just students who spend a lot in Cork. Real estate here is also very expensive and increasingly so. From May 2023 to May 2024, house prices have risen by almost 9%. Houses are expensive not only in Cork but also throughout its county, and this is due to remote work. In fact, Ireland is one of the 2 European nations where remote work is most common, with about a quarter of Irish workers working from home. This leads many people to move away from cities, and County Cork is one of the most sought-after destinations. This naturally drives up the cost of houses in those areas. Cork's rental prices are not very different from those in Munich, but the painful point is grocery shopping. In Cork, basic necessities generally cost more than in any of the cities we've seen so far. Fruits and vegetables are particularly expensive. In 2022, Ireland was the most expensive country in the European Union for household expenses, with prices 46% higher than the EU average. Number 5. Dublin, Ireland. Given what we've just said, the capital of Ireland couldn't be missing. In truth, grocery shopping in Dublin costs a bit less than in Cork, perhaps simply because it's easier to find a wider variety of prices. For everything else, the Irish capital is more expensive than Cork. Here, a single person spends on average nearly 1,100 euros per month, to which you have to add almost 2,000 euros for a studio apartment rent. A family of 4 spends on average nearly 3,800 euros per month, and if they want to rent a house in the city centre, they need to spend another 3,500 euros. If you want to buy a house, know that the average cost for purchasing a home is 405,000 euros. In reality, the high housing prices are due to Dublin's success. They are caused by the presence of large multinational companies and the large number of international students who come to study in Dublin. Both of these factors push Dubliners to rent or sell their homes at increasingly higher prices. Even public transportation contributes to increasing the cost of living. In fact, Dublin's public transport is one of the most expensive in Europe, with a monthly pass costing 115 euros at the time of making this video. Number 4. Amsterdam, Netherlands. In general, the cost of living is high throughout the country. According to Numbeo, it's the 6th most expensive country in the European Union in terms of living costs. Among all the cities, Amsterdam stands out as particularly expensive. Specifically, housing and food are much more costly than in the rest of the Netherlands. For example, the cost of living in Amsterdam is 16% higher than in Rotterdam, another major city in the country. When considering rent, it's 53% higher. It's easy to see why housing is so expensive. The population continues to grow, but the city's area is not very large. Additionally, it is a major tourist destination, as we discussed in the video on 10 European cities ruined by overtourism. This attracts investors from all over the world who buy houses to offer short-term rentals to tourists. Furthermore, since the cost of housing is so high, many young families opt to rent rather than buy. But this also drives up rental costs. Regarding food, supermarket prices are not particularly high, especially since you can find all types of supermarkets. But be careful if you go to a restaurant because you'll usually spend much more than the European average. Number 3. Espoo, Finland. Espoo is a small city of about 310,000 inhabitants located in southern Finland. Yet, it has a higher cost of living than the capital, Helsinki. Almost everything in Espoo is more expensive than in the capital: housing, food, restaurants, clothing, transportation, and more. As for housing, it's not at Amsterdam's level, but it's still very high. In fact, according to Statistics Finland, housing costs in Finland peaked in 2022 but are now decreasing and have reached pre-pandemic levels. In Espoo, they have dropped by over 8%. There aren't many places in Europe where this has happened, but the reason it has happened isn't good news. In recent years, there has been a significant increase in interest rates. This has meant that fewer people could afford to buy a house. This also occurred in other European countries, but in Finland, the rise in interest rates has pushed property owners to lower housing prices to make them a bit more accessible to families. In fact, in the past 2 years, many fewer houses have been sold because interest rates were simply unaffordable for families. This was also leading to a general real estate crisis and particularly affecting construction companies. Number 2, Paris, France. Paris is truly an expensive city. What saves Parisians is that in Paris, you can find various types of restaurants and supermarkets with a remarkable variety of prices. But it remains a city where the cost of living is significantly higher than the European average and the rest of France. Just consider that the National Institute of Statistics stated that in Paris, to purchase goods and services, you have to pay 7% more than in the rest of France. 75% of the 500 products selected in the Institute study have a higher price in the Paris region than in the provinces. The reason for this price difference is that shops have higher rents in Paris compared to the rest of France. Additionally, production costs and employee salaries are higher. Regarding the latter, a Parisian employee earns on average 9% more than others, and up to 28% more for a manager. But when it comes to real estate, Paris is even 40% more expensive than the rest of France. Consider that in 10 years, housing costs in Paris have increased by over 20%. However, it must be said that since 2021, they have slightly decreased. This is because the costs have become so high that fewer and fewer people were buying homes in Paris. There's also the fact that after the lockdown due to the pandemic, more and more Parisians decided to leave the capital and move to more comfortable places to live. Before revealing number 1, if you found this video informative, we invite you to give it a like. In fact, when this video reaches 400 likes, we will publish one on the 10 major cities in Europe with the lowest cost of living. And if you decide to subscribe to the channel, you would be doing us a great favor, as it would help us spread our project. Thank you very much. Number 1, Copenhagen, Denmark. Except for some food items and the cost of buying homes, everything is more expensive in Copenhagen than in Paris. A family of 4 spends on average more than 4,100 euros in Copenhagen. In general, Denmark is an expensive country. According to data provided by Numbeo, it is the country in the European Union with the highest cost of living. First of all, taxes are very high, as we have already explained in the dedicated video. Personal income is taxed overall at rates ranging from 38% to 55.9%. VAT is 25%, one of the highest in Europe. Many surveys have shown that Danes love taxes because they allow them to have a high standard of living and very high salaries. However, it is the second country in the European Union for tax evasion. In fact, in 2019, about 3,000 euros per person were evaded. In any case, the high cost of living and high taxes in Denmark also serve to ensure salaries that are higher than the European average. Regarding the cost of housing, there has been a slight decrease in recent years. This is because interest rates are rising and economic growth is slowing. As a result, fewer and fewer people can afford a house, and owners are forced to lower property prices if they want to sell them. On the left, you can see the ranking we've covered so far, while on the right, you can see the ranking that includes all cities on the European continent, not just those in the European Union. The highlighted cities are the ones outside the European Union with the highest cost of living. The most expensive city in Europe and the entire world is Geneva. The cost of living in the Swiss city is 42% higher than in Copenhagen, while rents are 50% higher than in the Danish capital. Now, we really want to hear about your experience. What is the situation in your city and country? Do you agree with the ranking compiled by Numbeo? Write it in the comments. If you found this video interesting, we recommend the one on the 10 European countries with the highest salaries. You can find it in the top right corner. That's all for this video. See you next time.